Take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your hand on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud. Maybe we found love right where we are.
"10 minutes passed and it was finally time to head home. Iwer Chan, being the gentleman he is, carried my heavy bag for me, only, it wasn't heavy for him since he's so muscular and all. The docking area with the school buses was already filled with students by the time we got there. One of the teachers spoke, gaining everyone's attention. "I hope you all enjoyed this trip and made lots of friends. As you all know, we're heading home in just a bit, so make sure to grab all your belongings." There were a lot of cheers throughout the teacher's speech, but I could also see sadness on the faces of many students. I guess I wasn't the only one feeling a little down about going home. At this point I was more worried about what would unfold when I get home. When we were instructed to get on the buses, people flooded through the doors of the closest bus. I lost track of Iwer Chan during all of the commotion and I didn't spot Shokei anywhere. They probably got on the first bus, which was now full. I waited a moment, just to see if I would spot them anywhere, but one of the teachers suggested I get on the second bus instead of standing around. Suddenly I felt that all too familiar unease and anxiety stirring to the surface. I'd hoped to ride with Iwer Chan, or even Shokei, but that didn't look likely. I didn't even get to say bye. I took the seat all the way to the back next to the window like I did on the day we came here. All the noisy chatter and shouting put me in greater discomfort, though everyone settled down eventually. That's when the buses took off. I watched as the trees passed. I watched the open fields come into view and disappear. I watched houses as they passed, and all of the people living their separate lives. What I wouldn't give to live a normal life, to have an ordinary family. Accepting things the way they are now would probably be better than hoping for something greater though, cause in the end I know I'll be disappointed. Around an hour after the buses started moving, the teens started to get hyper. Some stood up messing around, even though they were ordered to sit. Some threw things, and others just sat in their seats, like me. For some time the bus ahead of us was out of sight, though we could usually see it on straightaways. But eventually we saw it parked on the side of the road. The driver of our bus pulled over to check and see if something was wrong, and sure enough there was. We were told to stay on the bus, but after 10 minutes of waiting the driver allowed us off, though we couldn't leave the area. As I stepped out of the bus I saw Iwer Chan in the distance. I wanted to run up to him and give him the biggest hug, but that would be weird, especially in front of so many people. I missed him so much even though it was only like 2 hours since the buses took off. Iwer Chan shot me a smile when he spotted me leaving the bus. We both approached each other. "I was worried when I didn't see you on the bus, since you were right behind me when I got on," he said as he came up to me. "I lost sight of you," I admitted embarrassedly, rubbing my cheek. "I thought you ran away." "No way," I boomed, gaining some unwanted attention. I pouted him for thinking something so absurd. All the buses pulled over on the side of the road, waiting for permission to pass. This gave everyone enough time to change buses if they wished to do so. I practically clung to Iwer Chan, not wanting to lose sight of him again. Several people poured off bus 1 and got on bus 5. There weren't enough seats for everyone, so some people had to stay behind. A few minutes later the buses pulled away and drove off into the distance. Iwer Chan decided to stay behind, and I stayed with him. Some hours passed and the driver finally got the problem fixed. He didn't look too pleased. Anyone could hear him swearing under his breath within a 200-foot radius. During that period of time I sat in the grass off of the roadside and watched the sky. Iwer-chan joined me not long after. This moment reminded me of the first day of our trip when we cloud-gazed on that grassy hill. A few more people took to the grass a distance away from us, and the other teens were being just as loud as usual. Some were on their phones while others chased each other around. When we finally got back on the road, the sun was just about to set. I was actually glad for the delay. I was in no hurry to get back to my living hell. In fact, I wouldn't mind if we were stranded out here forever. That just means I would get to spend more time with Iwer-chan. Iwer-chan took the window seat and I sat next to him. I preferred sitting by the window, but I wouldn't dare take it from Iwer-chan. I'd much rather he have it. I noticed the area, which meant we were getting closer to Miyagi, the name of our town. It was fully night out and the inside of the bus quieted. It seemed many of the students fell asleep, including Iwer-chan. He looked so peaceful with his head laid against the glass of the window. Inside the bus felt cozy as it was very dark, with the exception of the occasional orange light of the street lamps glowing in through the windows. The street lamps made it feel much more cozy though. To no one's surprise, I was next to fall asleep. I woke up to the sound of the bus stopping and rising chatter. People were being dropped off at their houses. I realized it would be awful if I were dropped off at my house. My father would definitely get suspicious if I were dropped off this late. I didn't need that. We were nearing my neighborhood, so I told Iwer-chan I was getting off at the next stop. He asked why, but all I said was that my house is nearby. When the doors opened for the kid who was heading home, I made sure to exit before it shut. The driver gave me a strange look, like I was crazy. I told him the same thing as I did Iwer-chan. I didn't need anyone else getting involved in my family affairs. After saying bye to Iwer-chan, I ran off towards my house with my nerves growing with every step. By the time I reached my house, I was already a nervous wreck. My heart racing, my hands trembling, and a mountain in my throat. It was so much fun bowling with Koa. I found it cute how he'd get excited even if he only hit one pin. He was bouncing around like a goof. I definitely felt butterflies watching him. His body fit perfectly into mine as I helped him aim one of his shots. This was such an unusual feeling. I didn't want to let him go, but things probably would have gotten a little awkward. The end of our trip was nearing. I was going to miss not being able to cuddle with Koa every night. It really does feel amazing. His small body, his soft brown hair, his intoxicating smell. He always smelled like a basket of fruits, cherries especially. Having him pinned under me out in the rain was something I never imagined myself liking. I had to muster up all the force I had in me from getting excited down there. It would be extremely awkward sitting on his stomach sporting a boner. When we got back inside to dry off, Koa refused to do so in the bedroom. I guess I can understand him being so shy. He doesn't play for any of our school's sports teams, so he never really changes in front of other people, or at least I assume so. Waking up to Koa's face is a delight I'm going to miss. He's always so red when I see him. Is he really that embarrassed? He seems to be comfortable around me though, so could it possibly be something else? Dot 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 dot. Nah, I'm probably just overthinking it. I don't even know if he swings that way. The breakfast we had this morning was good. I'm glad we didn't have to leave feeling sick from food poisoning. At school the cafeteria food used to be so bad. Kids got sick from left to right, myself included. They were threatened to shut the school down if they didn't improve the food quality. They were forced to make some changes in the end, which were for the better. I almost cracked when watching the way Koa shoved down his food. It was such a silly yet adorable look on him. Yes, I fully accepted the fact that I find him cute, adorable, and attractive even. When we got back to the cabin, we both double-checked to see if we packed all of our things. We sat on the deck listening to one of my many playlists, waiting for time to pass. We hadn't planned anything special for today, so we just decided to wait. When it was finally time to head out, we lifted ourselves from the white stairs of the porch. Koa was struggling with his bag, so I lifted it from his arms and carried it for him. He gave me a shy half smile and muttered a thanks. We got to the center of the park and it was already filled with students. One of the teachers made a speech, capturing the attention of everyone. I hope you all enjoyed this trip and made lots of friends. As you all know, we're heading home in just a bit, so make sure to grab all your belongings. The speech seemed to be a success as many students were cheering. It was now time for everyone to board the buses. After handing Koa his bag, I headed onto the first bus, thinking Koa was following right behind. Just before I sat, I looked behind me only to notice Koa was nowhere in sight. I tried to plow my way through the students that poured in through the entrance of the bus, but it was like swimming against the current. It was impossible. The last person finally entered the bus, but the doors immediately closed and the bus took off. I just sighed to myself and plopped back in my seat. Yo dude, we've hardly seen you all week. A familiar voice shouts my way. I look back to the voice and notice it's Suna, one of the guys from the football team. I stood from my seat and made my way to their side. Yeah man, I just spent most of the trip chilling in my cabin. You should have partied with us, man. That's not what I came here for though. Dude, you're such a buzzkill. He replied, clearly disappointed. Suna isn't a bad guy, he can be pretty annoying at times though. Like most of my friends, he's not as clingy though. Me and the guys talked at the back of the bus for a while, discussing football strategies, schedules and girls. They were constantly pestering me about going out to pick up girls with them, but I continuously declined. I just wasn't interested. The bus suddenly began shaking before coming to a full stop. Banter quickly spread throughout the bus since everyone was wondering why we'd stopped. I was just as curious as the rest of them, to be honest. The bus driver got off the bus and told us to stay on as he went over to the engine. Oh my gosh, I'm going to miss my show if we like, stranded here for too long. Yeah, I have places to be. The other buses pulled up behind us and the drivers got off. I overheard their conversation. Something in the engine blew. Luckily our bus driver knows how to work with cars, or so he says. Soon enough everyone was permitted off the buses. I was eager to find Koa. I stepped off the bus and scanned the area, and sure enough I spotted him getting off the second bus. He lit up when he saw me, which made me happy. We'd become such good friends over the course of a week. I approached him as he did me. I was worried when I didn't see you on the bus, since you were right behind me when I got on. I lost sight of you. I thought you ran away. No way. He raised his voice, gaining us some looks. He gave me an adorable pout, making me chortle. The buses being pulled over gave people time to swap seats, and there were more people doing so than I could have imagined. There was a lot of fighting about who would sit where and who deserved a seat. That was expected though. The minority of students wanted to stay on the first bus as it was still broken down. Koa and I were in no rush to get home, so I decided to just stay with the first bus. It would save us a lot of trouble this way. The buses were eventually granted permission to pass. Now only a handful of students left. Koa stuck close to my side the whole time, probably not wanting to lose sight of me. I would have done the same. A while later the driver finally got the problem fixed. He clearly wasn't having a good day. During the downtime Koa went over to the hill on the side of the road and laid in the green grass. I followed him and placed myself next to him. A couple other people got the idea to lay on the hill, only they were a distance away from us. Most of the students just continued being their hyper and rowdy selves though. When it was finally time to get back on the bus, I took the seat next to the window in the far back of the bus. Koa sat down beside me. I turned to give him a small smile. He returned it, only much sweeter. We spent the ride just watching the window. The perfect mix of colors capturing the sky, the vast green land, the cozy homes. Before I knew it I'd fallen asleep. I woke as people began getting dropped off at their homes. I glanced at Cora only to see worry present on his face. I wanted to do something to reassure him, but nothing came to mind, at least that wouldn't draw attention anyway. I'm getting off at the next stop, Cora announced suddenly. I gave him a questioning look. Why, is that where you live? I live in the area, he replied strangely. I would have continued with my questions, but he didn't seem like he was in the mood to answer them. When the bus came to another stop, Cora sprung out of his seat, told me bye and walked off the bus. He told the driver he lived in the area so he would just walk home. He received a lot of questioning looks, but he was already too far away from the bus to notice. He'd always start acting odd whenever the topic of home was brought up. He seems to be having family trouble. I guess it's just like everyone else. We all have our rocky moments with our families at times. Another 20 minutes passed and it was finally my stop. I lifted my bag and headed for the front door of my large house. Walking up the path after coming home from school is actually soothing, despite the location. The flower beds and hedges along the path are just enough to distract me from the thought of my parents sitting inside the house. It's almost like they set it all up on purpose, just to lure me in. Welcome home, how was your trip? My mum yelled, bursting out the door before I could even make it to the entrance. It was fine, Mum. I sigh in frustration. The trip was more than fine, it was amazing actually. I just wanted to get rid of her. Tell me everything that happened. She beamed, grabbing my hands and pulling me inside. I just let myself get pulled, with a long groan. I should have known I couldn't shake her that easily. Dear, James returned. She yelled through the house. Not too long after, my father showed his face, adding to my disappointment even more. I just wanted to make it to my room without being spotted by these crazy lunatics. You think I would have gotten used to their antics by now, but nope, they somehow managed to surprise me till this day. How was my son's trip? My father chuckles while wrapping an arm around my neck, almost forcing me to the floor. It was fine, I repeat, raising my voice. I can tell you had a lot of fun. You look excited. My father starts. I mentally groan. Look who's talking. Can I go to my room now? I question them angrily. Come, tell us what happened. My mother drags me over to the couch in the living room, gesturing her hand for me to sit down. I groan out loud this time. They have to be doing this on purpose. I'm already missing that quiet, dark cabin, and Cora, yes Cora. I hope I see him at school tomorrow. I ran down the road towards my house in the dingy-looking neighborhood. The area always felt so damp and eerie. I guess that's the reason why there's mold growing everywhere. Running to my house with my mountain-sized bag was like running an uphill marathon. My world froze when I finally reached the steps to my house, or apartment rather. I crept up the stairs to the deck as quietly as possible, hoping to be void of my father. I didn't need a black eye before school. I placed my hand on the handle of the door. It stayed that way for a couple of minutes, going over the possibilities that could take place. I just decided to open it. I crept in and slowly shut the door behind me. I think I died a little when I heard someone clearing their voice. Why haven't I seen you recently? My father spoke in a deep, dull tone, setting my nerves on edge. I guess we've just been missing each other. I responded quietly, staring at the floor under me. Or you've been avoiding me. A ton was lifted off of my shoulders when I realized he might not know where I was. Instead of responding, I stayed silent since I didn't know how to respond to his accusation. I heard his footsteps approach me and I tensed up. I felt a sharp pain glide across my face. He'd slapped me. Are you ignoring me? He yelled, making me jump in my spot. No, I'm sorry. I continued speaking in a hushed, nervous voice. TSK. Was all that escaped his teeth before he shoved me out of the way. He left the house, slamming the old door behind him. I released a huge breath while clutching my chest. If he were drunk, I know he wouldn't have let me off so easily. I didn't wait for him to return. I immediately headed for the stairs and into my bedroom. It seemed to be a lot more trashed since I'd been in it last. I guess this was my father's way of coping without anyone to beat on. I cleaned my carpet of torn books and shattered glass. My bed has never looked so discomforting. I sat my bag next to it and unpacked all my things. I hid all of the books under my bed so my father wouldn't get a hold of them. I brushed my teeth and headed to bed, skipping my non-existent dinner. I drifted to sleep with thoughts of the trip still on my mind. I actually have friends. I can't believe it. Iwer-chan is extra special to me though. He's the most thoughtful, caring person since my grandparents. That's why I've fallen in love with him. That's why oh crap, I really have. I didn't mean for this to happen. I knew nothing more would come of our friendship, but I still fall for him. Why am I so stupid? Couldn't I have just settled for a normal friendship? I fell asleep with my face completely red at these thoughts, both from frustration and the thought of Iwer-chan. I managed to sleep the night without waking up in cold sweat. I'm assuming it's cause I fell asleep with Iwer-chan on my mind. I woke up early since I'd gone to sleep pretty early. I decided to sneak out of the house before my father woke up, so I got ready for school and quietly slunk down the old wooden stairs. I didn't want to be in the house for another second, so I quickly took to the door. Where do you think you're sneaking off to? The sound of the devil echoed through the room. I turned to spot my father sitting in his usual chair at the dining table with an upset look on his face. Oh gosh, I think he's drunk. My legs were ready to give out on me already. I practically swore under my breath. This was a pretty bad situation. I wanted to run out at that precise moment, but I knew he'd probably kill me later. He stood from his chair and slowly approached me. Each coming step shook the ground under my feet like an earthquake. When he finally reached me, he stood there for a while, making me that much more nervous. Soon enough I felt a pair of hands wrap around my neck. He held me tight, choking the air out of my lungs. I felt so helpless. I didn't try to fight back or resist him, I couldn't. Tears streamed down my face, and when they landed on his arm he released me. I knew his session wasn't over yet, so I prepared for the worst. He balled up a fist and lunged it into my stomach. His force was enough to knock me off my feet and onto the floor. He gave me a couple good kicks before storming out the house like last night. I lay there frozen on the ground, trying to compose myself. I went back to my room and cleaned myself before heading off to school. When I looked in my half-smashed mirror, I saw hand marks on my pale neck. I really hope no one sees them. I tried to cover it up with the collar of my shirt as best I could. I sat patiently at the bus stop, rubbing my painful new bruises. Not too long after arriving, the bus pulled up. I got on and sat in my usual seat. I looked out the window the whole drive. I was pulled from my daze when the bus suddenly stopped, sending me face first into the back of a solid leather seat. I pouted and rubbed my aching nose. I'm just a magnet for pain, aren't I? Damn kids. The driver grumbled. I assume they walked in front of the bus. The driver pulled in and the students began flowing off the bus. Walking up the stairs and heading into the school has never been so nerve-wracking or exciting. I was pretty disappointed when I didn't see Iwer-chan, and the first couple of periods have already passed. I decided to head to lunch, and to my surprise I ran into Iwer-chan and his group on the way. Hey! Iwer-chan called across the hall. I lifted my head to him and a smile crept onto my face. My day suddenly got 1,000 times better just from his presence. Hi. I replied with a small wave. His friends turned their head and eyed me weirdly as I approached them. I felt so uncomfortable, but I had to see Iwer-chan, even if it's just for a bit. Without him I know I'd slip back down into the darkest pits of depression. He's the only soul bright enough to keep mine afloat. These are my friends. He gestures to them. Yo. One guy tossed me a wave before turning all of his attention to the phone in his hand. Some of the girls gave me quick smiles, and the other two guys completely ignored me. Yup, I definitely feel out of place. Iwer-chan introduced all of them since they didn't really seem willing. This is Suzuki, Fujita, Morita, Okada, Mida and Kondo. He pointed to each of them as he spoke their name. I could have introduced myself. Kondo pouted at him. He raised his hands. Forgive me, I didn't expect you to say anything. Shouldn't we get lunch before our period is over? Morita rushed. You guys are so strange. One moment you can be loud and clingy and the next you can be so self-absorbed that you walk into a pole. But I guess you're right, we should probably get moving. Wanna come with us, Koa? Please say yes. He asked, muttering the last part. I nodded in response. I'd gladly go. I followed behind the group quietly. I continued while we sat at the table. I obviously gained some strange looks since I was a nobody who happened to be sitting at one of the popular tables. Iwer-chan's friends ignored me and chatted between themselves, even when Iwer-chan clearly tried to include me in the conversations. I felt so out of place and awkward, I considered just getting up and leaving the table. There was one girl who kept glancing between me and Iwer-chan though. Her name was Kondo if I'm remembering correctly. I wondered what she was thinking. Soon enough the painful lunch was over as the bell rang. Iwer-chan sent me a sort of apologetic look as I quickly fled from the table. He'd done nothing wrong, it was his friends, so I gave him a reassuring smile before heading off to my next class. All my classes were done for today, so I planned on heading back home. I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. When I got outside I saw Iwer-chan standing near the door. Oi. Sorry about earlier. He apologized while throwing up a wave. It's fine. It was a bit hurtful to be ignored like that, but in the end it's fine. I got an idea earlier today. I tilted my head slightly, waiting for him to speak further. I want to see that bridge we spoke about the other day. I need to get away from everyone for a while. I thought for a while, trying to form directions in my head. You take the first left turn after exiting the school, continue driving for a while, then tar. Was all I managed before he interrupted me. No, you're coming with me. I felt heat creeping at my cheeks. I thought you saw. I tried before being interrupted again. Said I wanted to be alone? You're an exception. I'll always be in the mood to hang out with you. That is, unless you start nagging me like the others. He warned playfully. Wow, I actually felt honored. For the first time in forever I felt special. He was the only one besides my grandparents and my mother to actually make me feel more than dirt. My father practically treats me like I'm dirt now with the way he steps on me. I nod, listening to his command. All right, you'll have to direct me as we're going, he said, while running towards his car. Oi, hurry. I don't need my friends catching up with me, he shouted in a whisper. Dang it, why did I always have to pack heavy bags? This thing was slowing me down like crazy. Crap, sorry. I breathed, hunching down, out of breath. He popped the passenger side open and ran to the driver's side. I slouched my bag over the side of the seat and sat down, shutting the door behind me. I gave him directions as he passed familiar areas, well familiar to me anyway. I told him where to park, then we got out. I ran through a small dense forest with him tailing close behind. It was exciting having someone else here with me. This was my first time having anyone tag along, and I was glad it was Iwer-chan. I hope you're not taking me somewhere to murder me out of sight. I should be saying the same, since you know you're the one who made me come and all. I fired back while we continued through the forest. Are you saying you don't want to be here? I hesitated to reply, making him raise a brow. No. I do actually. This is a lot of fun. I mumbled the last part, but he still seemed to hear it. Okay, that's good to know. At that moment we'd finally made it out of the forest. The sun beamed over the mountain as it had begun setting. Its light still managed to be cast over the whole area, lighting up the old bridge. It also brought out the colors of the forest and land. It looked like an image straight out of a postcard. This was the most beautiful I'd ever seen the area look. It usually looks a little depressing and sad on rainy days, so this was really mind-blowing. Not to mention I had Iwer-chan with me, though that could be why I'm noticing all of this beauty. Iwer-chan always seemed to make the place bright, even during the darkest nights. I sat there looking up at the blue and orange sky in awe until I heard Iwer-chan snickering. You really seem to be taking in this moment. I can't blame you though, this place is quite the scene. He finished before heading over to the bridge while studying the area. I snapped out of my lengthy daze and followed behind him. Do cars still use this road? He asked as he leaned over the rails, checking the river beneath us. Only a few every day. That new bridge a mile over took all the traffic, literally. I explained whilst including a silly joke. We both laughed. I was happy he found it funny even though I knew it was awful. It felt good to be making jokes again. I hadn't in the longest time, though there were a few times when I tried to crack a joke to my old friends, who were probably currently after my blood. They didn't find it funny and continued ignoring me until it was time for me to pay for their things. That hurt me more than I'd thought at the time. This is such a nice change from my usual routine. Iwer-chan sighed a breath of relief. Yeah, same here. I spoke in a small quiet voice. I leaned on the rails alongside Iwer-chan and watched as the dark blue water flowed across the rocks that bathed in the shadow-coated river. The sound of the water and the bird songs in the distance made this moment that much more magical. It made my love for Iwer-chan grow even more. This was not a good thing however, considering my situation. As the light from the setting sun had faded, Iwer-chan got in the road and extended his arms to feel the oncoming breeze. I quickly joined him, not wanting to miss out on the experience. A smile captured my face as I got a whiff of the sweet evening air as it gently passed us by. All of the flowers and plants around really added to the scent. We spent a lot of time off the bridge and on the side of the road, hopping rocks and tossing stones into the river. There was still enough light to watch our footing and to see the rocks hit the water, but the night was closing in fast. We should probably head back now. Okay. I replied, with a small nod. I wished to stay out here the whole night, or possibly forever just messing around. The thought of it had me excited, but I knew it wouldn't be possible. We both had our lives to get back to. I led him back through the forest. It was much harder to traverse at night, but I'd been here enough times to know the landmarks. When we got in his car he turned on the engine and I saw the time. It's 7:25 p.m. After a moment of driving I realized I'd have to tell him where I lived. I didn't want that. So instead I just directed him towards my neighborhood. Where should I turn next? Iwer-chan asked, studying the area. You can drop me off over there. I say, pointing to a brown brick building out of his windshield. You live there? He asked, sounding skeptical. I thought for a second before answering. No, I live in the area though. I decided to answer honestly. Why don't you let me drive you to your home? Bye. I said quickly, getting out of the while ignoring him. I made sure to grab my bag then hurried down the sidewalk. I felt bad for ditching him like that, but I just couldn't let him see or know where I live. The musty air of the dingy-looking neighborhood hit my nose, making me a little uncomfortable. After smelling that air at the bridge, I'm sure anyone could tell how foul this air currently smells. After a few minutes of walking I finally made it home, making sure Iwer-chan, or anyone else, weren't following me. I slowly turned the door handle, trying to make as little noise as possible in case my father was home. Thankfully when I got inside he was nowhere in sight. On my way to drop Ko off I caught a couple glances at his peaceful face. I couldn't tell if he noticed I was looking at him, but I didn't really care. After following his directions we made it to his neighborhood. To be honest, it didn't look very safe and looked kinda run down. I was really questioning if this is where he lived. It didn't suit him at all. You can drop me off over there, he told me, pointing to a brown brick building. You live there? I asked, skeptical. It really didn't suit him. He stayed silent for a moment before speaking his reply. No, I live in the area though. Why don't you let me drive you to your home? Bye, he said, quickly getting out of my car. He ignored me and hurried away. Boy, this kid can be weird sometimes. Why didn't he want me to take him home? Is it messy? Better yet, does he have a home? He most likely does, with the amount of books and clothes he has though. I sighed and pulled off the curb, driving back to my house. Spending the evening with Cora was amazing. I'm sad it had to end but happy it happened at all. He really is like a breath of fresh air. The same can't be said for his neighborhood however. I don't even mind being abducted by my parents. I had a great day and nothing could ruin it. After pulling up in the driveway near the gate of our house, I walked up the garden and to our front door. When I got inside, my mother stood from the couch and pulled me in. How was your day, sweetheart? She asked in a motherly tone. It was great actually. I smiled at her. She gasped, probably surprised at my calm reaction. I'm usually pushing them away or resisting them, but today I replied normally. It must be a girl. She assumed, gasping. No, Mom. It's a girl, isn't it? She continued, with her gasps growing louder. Mom, it's nothing like that. Remember how I was telling you about the trip yesterday? Well, I neglected to tell you that I made a new friend, and he's a really cool guy. If he can get you in such a good mood, I'd love to meet him. He must be a real angel. She said while pulling me further into the house. So you really do know you can be annoying, don't you? I snickered. She just scoffed and went back to being her. Honey, our son made a new friend. She yelled. I mentally and physically sigh. Why does she always have to make my life a public announcement? She didn't do this to my brother or sister. It's like her and Dad are always trying to humiliate me. After a 10-minute conversation with my parents, I staggered off to my room. I dropped my school bag next to my queen-size bed and plopped my back to the soft sheets. What a day. I hope Cora enjoyed it as much as I did. That got me thinking about my friends and how they ignored him for most of the day. That was awful. They didn't drop their attention from me for a moment and blatantly ignored Cora. If they kept it up, they wouldn't be my friends for much longer. Later I grabbed a snack from the kitchen and headed off to bed. When I woke the next morning, I prepared myself for school as usual. As I was making my way down the stairs to the kitchen, I caught my brother glaring at me. I frowned in response. He's never seemed to like me very much, but I don't know what I did to make him dislike me. He's a pretty cool guy too, so it's a little sad with the way he treats me. I grabbed a bowl of cereal before heading out to my car. I would take my brother to school, but he refuses every time I offer. I guess he prefers taking the bus. I pulled out of the driveway and drove off to school.